Who is K. Carl Smith? Well, listen to what the influential website Red State wrote about him. K. Carl Smith may soon be one of the most influential people in America. He's one of the most important people grassroots conservatives should be listening to right now. K. Carl is the president and founder of Frederick Douglass Republicans and the author of the best-selling book, Frederick Douglass Republicans, the movement to reignite America's passion for liberty. You may have seen K. Carl on the Blaze TV, the Huckabee Show on Fox News, and elsewhere. He's also featured in the documentary Runaway Slave. Ladies and gentlemen, K. Carl Smith.
To become a Frederick Douglass Republican has nothing to do with your ethnicity or your skin color, but has everything to do by you embracing the four life empowering values of Frederick Douglass. Number one, respect for the U.S. Constitution. Number two, respect for life. Number three, the belief in limited government. In other words, I like to keep more of the money that I make. And four, the belief in personal responsibility. That's a biblical principle. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. Those are the four life empowering values of Douglass. Okay? If you believe in those four life empowering values of Douglass, then guess what? You are a Frederick Douglass Republican. Okay? It's not about color. It's not about color. It's about values. And about of the 60,000 plus members we have of our movement who've also been trained in methodology, 59% of them are white. 59%. Okay? So it's not about color, it's about values. Myth number two is this, that the Frederick Douglass Republican methodology that I'm going to quickly talk about, that it is a methodology on how to share conservatism with the minority community. That is not true. The Frederick Douglass Republican methodology of engagement, it is a methodology on how to share the life-empowering values of the conservative philosophy to all Americans. And that big umbrella is liberty. If you're going to have a conversation about liberty, you got to bring Douglass in that conversation. Let me give you a quick class on Douglass, because most of you may have forgotten some things about Douglass. I'll give you about 2 minutes on that. Douglass, of course, was born not too far from here in Eastern Shores area of Maryland in 1818. Frederick Douglass was born below poverty. See, Dr. Ben Carson and Herman Cain, they were born into poverty. But when you're born into slavery, you're born below poverty because you don't even own your own body. He never owned a pair of shoes until he was 8 years old, never slept in a bed till the age of 10. Frederick Douglass was homeschooled, self-taught. He learned how to read and write while he was a slave boy on a plantation. He was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. He escaped from slavery in 1838. He escaped from slavery in 1838. What did he escape from? Well, the slave master was providing him with food, shelter, clothing, and health care. Slavery by government is still slavery. I guess you would say that Douglass, since he was getting that free stuff, that he was the 47%er. But the story doesn't end there. He escaped from slavery in 1838. He got involved in the abolitionist movement, kind of fast beat this thing. Frederick Douglass was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents. 5 Republican presidents. That's not bad for a guy with 0 days of formal schooling. He was an advisor to Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. Frederick Douglass was a capitalist. He was a free market entrepreneur. He wrote 3 autobiographies. He didn't have a ghostwriter. He wrote 3 autobiographies. Pretty impressive. Frederick Douglass passed away in 1895 as a result of a heart attack at the age of 77. How much money, don't you answer this, I know you know the answer. How much money in savings do you think Douglass had amassed at the time of his death?
Over $300,000.
$300,000. $300,000 back then is more than $10 million today. So here's a man who was born below zero, ended up being a 47%er, died a 1%er. My point to you is this. My point to you is this. If we are serious about defending liberty, if we are serious about defending the Constitution, we must make Frederick Douglass an integral part of our conservative message. If not, we're doomed for failure. Douglas trumps the race card. Douglas defeats the class warfare attacks. The quintessential constitutional conservative was Frederick Douglass. The quintessential American dream story is Frederick Douglass. Thank God we have a literary legacy of the writings of Frederick Douglass to refute the lies and propaganda of the left. What I've come to understand is this, that the political insight of Frederick Douglass is more important than the political insights of the founding fathers. That's heresy, K. Carl. That's blasphemy, K. Carl. Let me prove my point. The founding fathers gave us two magnificent documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now, some of the founding fathers owned slaves. And when the Constitution was ratified, that's not when they freed their slaves. The slaves were freed after the death of some of the founders. So therefore, when it comes to liberty, the founding fathers they're somewhat tainted. And the left plays on that. They play on that. On the other hand, Frederick Douglass did not own any slaves. He was a slave, and in his writings and his speeches, he affirmed the founding fathers and he affirmed the Constitution, and the left don't have an answer for that. Douglass said on one occasion, the Constitution reads, "We the people." It does not read, "We the white people," Douglass said. If black folks are people, then they are to be included as benefactors of the Constitution. Douglass concluded that thing by saying, the problem is not with the Constitution. The problem is in the application of the Constitution. The problem is not with the Bible. The problem is in the application of the Bible. So the words of Douglass is key, how we can save this nation. So Frederick Douglass is the bridge over the abyss of racism and class warfare that's been created by the left. Here's how we use this methodology. I am a conservative, but that's not how I describe myself politically. The word conservative, Republican, and Tea Party, those words have a negative connotation, not just in the black community, but all across the country because of the media. So if you say you're a black conservative, a Reagan conservative, a Christian conservative, a Tea Party conservative, you might as well drop that last word conservative. Basically, it's okay in here, but if you're out there engaging, you might as well drop that last word conservative, call yourself a black racist, a Tea Party racist, or Reagan racist. So the way we broaden the tent of the conservative movement is not to compromise our principles. That's not the answer. We don't have a message problem, we have a messaging problem. The way we try to engage, it does not work. We can't trump the race card. We can't defeat the class warfare attacks. So when we get out there and try to engage, we have already been discredited and our message falls on deaf ears. And that's really upsetting because most Americans identify themselves as conservatives. So what we did, my brother and I'm not here to hawk the book, but I'm gonna share with you what works. You've heard of Senator Elbert Guillory out of Louisiana? A Democrat politician that switched, became a Republican? Well, here's the story behind that story you may not know. I was invited to speak at the at-large conference in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, speaking of the luncheon. As part of my duties, I was to give out the first Frederick Douglass Award to their local politician. That politician was Senator Elbert Guillory. Of course, I'm not going to give out any Frederick Douglass Award without calling the person first to make sure they exemplify the values of Douglass. I said, give me his contact information. So 2 months before his switch, I talked to him over the phone. Make sure, find out more about him, found out he had a very conservative record as a Democrat. And he said to me over the phone, he said, I'm thinking about using that convention as a platform to switch parties, but I'm very hesitant to do it. I said, why? If I do it, it's political suicide. I'm gonna lose my constituents. I said, you're exactly right. I said, Senator, what are you gonna do? He said, I don't know. So at that time, I started mentoring him and coaching him on the Frederick Douglass Republican methodology. So when he came out, you saw he cloaked himself in Douglass. Douglass is the answer. Douglass is the answer. The third myth that I want to dispel, I need you to stop believing the lie that because you are a white conservative, that you cannot engage somebody of a different ethnicity. You can do it, but you must be trained in something that works. I know some black conservatives who cannot engage black folks. So it's not about color. You must be trained in something that works. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. I don't use the word conservative when I engage. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. And when I found out over the past 5 years, give me some water, 'cause I'm gonna lose my voice in a minute. I found out over the past 5 years that when someone that's not a black American says, I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican, and they carefully study and show themselves approved, what I'm saying, it's more powerful when you do it than when I do it. Frederick Douglass, that's my ethnicity. People expect me to say that. But all we hear through the media is what? White conservatives are racist. Republicans are racist. They have no redemptive bone in the body. They're racist, will always be racist. But if you have someone that carefully studied to show themselves approved and says, I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican, you just took control of the narrative. You're driving the debate, the discussion, and through engagement, you're changing hearts and minds. So what we're doing with our organization, we're traveling the country, and we're preaching to the choir. We're having some home games. Because having home games, you got to preach to the choir. See, the conservative choir needs to be empowered. The conservative choir must be trained and equipped how to go out and get new choir members. I contend that the greatest unused asset we have to save this nation is not being utilized. That's white conservatives. The movement is majority white. What happens if we empower each of them, every one of them, how to get out here and engage? How to talk to your friends, your family members, and your fellow citizens about your conservative values without the fear of being called a racist, or in my case, without the fear of being called a sellout. So that's what it's all about. We have to get in the trenches. We have to get in the trenches, start changing hearts and minds by engaging our friends, our family members, and our fellow citizens. And the Douglass is the key for doing that. Without Douglass, it won't work. You can't call a Frederick Douglass Republican a racist. Douglass wasn't a racist. He was a victim of racism. You cannot call a Frederick Douglass Republican that we don't care about the poor. Nobody did more for the poor than Frederick Douglass. Thank God for giving us Douglass to help us save our nation. The left, they'll have an answer for that. And once we get this Frederick Douglass message on a national level, you're going to see liberals, either they're going to go back to France or they're going to jump out of windows. One of the two. One of the two. And I close with this one testimony. Sharon Angle, you know Sharon Angle out of Nevada, who ran against Senator Reid. Oh, boy. I met Sharon last summer. She is now the president of the Republican Assemblies, and we exchanged books. And I shared with her about this Frederick Douglass Republican message. Quickly, what happened, the testimony is this. Sharon lives in Reno, Nevada. She and I were supposed to speak at an event in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay? On her way to Atlanta, Sharon's in she's in the Reno airport, and 3 black women recognized her. And they engaged her. They said, Sharon, where are your travels taking you this time? And Sharon said she made up in her mind she was going to try this Frederick Douglass Republican thing out that Kay Carl talked about. So the woman asked her, where are your travels taking you this time, Mrs. Angle? Sharon responded by saying, well, I'm going to Atlanta to meet a Frederick Douglass Republican friend of mine. The 3 women replied, Frederick Douglass was a Republican? Sharon replied, yes, Frederick Douglass was a Republican. He believed in 4 life empowering values: respect for the Constitution, respect for life, the belief in limited government, and belief in personal responsibility. And they said to Sharon, can you come to our church and share this message? Sharon was so excited, so empowered, that for the first time she had a chance to engage somebody of a different ethnicity without the fear of being called a racist, and by sharing her values. She was so empowered that through her PAC, she bought 10,000 copies of my book so we can continue to get this message out. We need some heroes. It's time for us to make history again. What we need is this. We need a conservative hero. Someone who can spark an emotional appeal for conservative values. That's Frederick Douglass. That's what I want to leave with you. The answer to save this nation is with us. It's Frederick Douglass. He helped Lincoln to save a nation. And it behooves us to get into the writings of Douglass and for us to become Frederick Douglass Liberty Messengers. Start talking to our friends, our family members. Everybody got somebody in their family that's a liberal. And they come around your house, around Thanksgiving. I'm trying to bring some political healing to your family. But my message to you is this. We have the answer now. There is something that you can do right now to start engaging.